The morning of the presentation felt like the beginning of a new era. For 3 relentless months, I had lived inside that project. Early mornings, dim office lights, and endless iterations had shaped a system capable of automating processes no competitor had even imagined. The boardroom reflected the gravity of the moment. Reporters were on standby, investors were watching through a live stream, and everyone expected a miracle that would double our market value. My name was printed on every agenda. It was supposed to be my moment, the culmination of every sacrifice I had ever made for that company. As I walked through the room, the CEO barely acknowledged me. He was the kind of man who believed loyalty was expendable and that leadership was inherited, not earned. Still, I remained calm. I connected my laptop, took a breath, and began my pitch. The opening slide unveiled the architecture of the company's downfall didn't happen overnight. It unfolded in stages, like a building slowly losing its foundation. Contracts that once seemed permanent evaporated one by one. Long-term clients who used to send holiday baskets now sent terse emails announcing their transition to competitors. The board tried to hide the decay with optimistic projections and forced enthusiasm, but figures do not lie. Revenue had plateaued, customer confidence was slipping, and every department felt the silent panic of an organization running out of time. People stopped talking during breaks, afraid their voices would carry rumors that might cost them their jobs. In the midst of this quiet collapse, I had been working on a radical idea that could reverse everything. The system I created was not just another software update. It was an entirely new way of aligning compliance, reporting, and workflow automation in a single intelligent platform. Most companies relied on fragmented tools held together by patches and manual labor. My system eliminated that chaos. It streamlined data extraction, verified records against regulatory standards in real time, and generated audits without human involvement. The level of accuracy it produced exceeded anything available in the industry. If launched correctly, it could reduce operational costs by millions in the first year alone. More importantly, it could restore the company's reputation as a pioneer rather than a fading relic. The CEO saw my prototype during an internal review and immediately sensed an opportunity. His face lit up in a way I had never seen. For years, he had obsessed over public perception. He didn't care about innovation or efficiency. He cared about headlines, applause, and being credited as the man who saved a sinking empire. My creation offered the perfect redemption arc for him. He envisioned magazine covers and conference stages where he would take credit for the innovation he barely understood. His enthusiasm was never about the technology itself. It was about the narrative he believed it could give him. His son reacted differently. He had spent his entire life trying to prove his worth, yet every achievement he claimed had been handed to him. My system represented something he could steal and parade as proof of his competence. He hovered over my desk, made vague comments about modernizing infrastructure, and asked questions he barely comprehended. He was a man chasing admiration without earning respect. To him, my work was not a breakthrough. It was a convenient mask to hide his inadequacy. The board indulged him, believing youth equaled innovation. They were blind to the fact that ambition without knowledge is just a disaster waiting to happen. What neither of them realized was that I had not built this tool out of loyalty. I had built it out of survival. I had seen too many brilliant employees discarded after handing over their best ideas. Corporate history is full of forgotten names, innovators who created fortunes they never received. I refused to join that cemetery of naive talent. Every line of code I wrote was backed by legal protection. Every patent application was filed under my name alone. I didn't brag about it. I didn't mention it casually. I simply prepared for the day I knew was coming. When the CEO began speaking about investor demonstrations and press releases, I knew they intended to cut me out. They assumed my gratitude outweighed my intellect. They believed I was just another cog desperate to keep his job. They never asked how the system worked, never wondered why I never revealed certain authentication keys, and never questioned the quiet smile I carried during every meeting. The idea they tried to steal wasn't just software. It was the lifeline they believed would save them. And they walked straight into a trap built not out of revenge, but out of experience. Experience, after all, is the best insurance policy against betrayal. The shift began subtly. It was the kind of change most employees dismiss as coincidence, but I had been in corporate environments long enough to recognize when something was being orchestrated behind closed doors. The CEO, a man who once ignored my existence unless a deadline loomed, suddenly became overly cordial. He lingered in hallways, complimented my work in front of others, and even invited me to meetings he previously kept exclusive. Flattery from a man who never believed in talent without pedigree was not a compliment. It was bait. Then his son appeared everywhere I turned. He sat in on meetings that had nothing to do with his department, asked questions that revealed he hadn't read a single page of the system's documentation, and always positioned himself close enough to hear confidential conversations. He was trying to absorb the language of innovation without understanding its substance, convinced proximity was the same as ownership. His presence wasn't mentorship. It was surveillance. Human resources followed next. They requested updated forms, employment history, and detailed descriptions of my role. They framed it as routine compliance, but no one else received such requests. Their eyes never met mine when they spoke. They were preparing the paperwork required to remove me without complication. I had seen enough reorganizations and strategic restructurings to understand that HR rarely acts without executive orders. So, while they thought they were tightening a noose around my career, I was constructing my escape. I hired an intellectual property lawyer and documented everything: version histories, timestamps, design drafts, and emails proving the system originated from my initiative alone. I stopped giving verbal explanations and ensured every clarification was written and traceable. Corporate memory is short, but legal records are eternal. The final stroke was timing. I scheduled the patent submission so it would be approved and public the very morning of the presentation. By the time the board gathered, the technology was mine legally, indisputably, and irrevocably. When they fired me mid-presentation, they believed they were erasing a problem. Instead, they severed themselves from the only person allowed to use the engine of their supposed comeback. They mistook silence for weakness. They mistook patience for obedience. They mistook me for someone who didn't understand how quickly loyalty becomes liability in a boardroom. I didn't prepare for revenge. I prepared for survival. I didn't go home after they escorted me out. I walked 2 blocks, found a quiet cafe, and ordered a black coffee. The humiliation they intended had evaporated before the steam rose from my cup. I knew the real show was about to begin, and all I had to do was wait. It didn't take long. My phone started vibrating like a trapped insect desperate to escape. At first, I ignored it. Then the notifications stacked faster than I could swipe them away. A text from a board member appeared, short and cryptic, asking if I was available for a quick clarification. Clarification was a gentle word for panic. Next came 2 missed calls from the CEO. The same man who smirked at me in the boardroom now seemed eager to hear my voice. His messages shifted tone with every attempt. The first was assertive, the second concerned, and the third, though he never said it, reeked of fear. I didn't respond. My silence was doing more damage than any argument ever could. Then came the IT department. Their texts were frantic, filled with jargon and question marks. They couldn't access core modules. Licensing keys rejected their credentials. The system they thought they owned refused to run beyond the demo screen, and everything routed back to a patent number they didn't recognize. The realization hit them slowly, then violently. The intellectual property rights were not tied to the company. They were tied to me. Meanwhile, investors on the live stream began asking questions the CEO's son couldn't answer. How did the system authenticate? Who controlled the licensing server? Where was the technical documentation? He froze under pressure, exposed not just as unprepared, but as irrelevant. He attempted to bluff his way through explanations, but each answer unraveled into a deeper web of ignorance. The boardroom that once felt like a victory stage was now a crime scene of arrogance. Someone finally searched the patent database. They expected to see the company's name attached to a revolutionary innovation. Instead, they saw mine printed in bold, unmistakable letters. The silence in that room must have been deafening. The same executives who watched me escorted out like a liability now scrambled for solutions that did not exist. I didn't sabotage them. They sabotaged themselves. All I did was let the truth surface. By the next morning, they had rewritten history in their minds. The CEO called me personally, his voice suddenly soft, soaked in the kind of politeness reserved for people whose cooperation has become essential. He spoke of a misunderstanding, as though security escorting me out in front of an entire board was an accidental hiccup. I listened, not because I owed him anything, but because curiosity is a powerful teacher. He offered my old position back, a title upgrade, and a salary increase that would make most people fold. He didn't understand that once you're thrown out of a burning building, you don't run back inside because they upgraded the curtains. I clarified what he didn't want to hear. My departure wasn't emotional. It was strategic. The product was registered under my name. The architecture license was mine. The authentication keys were mine. Their presentation, their pipeline, and their entire future IPO were nothing more than smoke without legal rights to the engine powering it. His silence confirmed what I already knew. They hadn't prepared for resistance. They expected panic, maybe desperation, but not control. Then came the board. They tried a different tactic, diplomacy mixed with condescension. They spoke of synergy, collaboration, mutual opportunities. Each word danced around the truth they refused to say out loud. They needed me more than they needed their pride. When I declined their offers, the tone shifted. The questions became veiled threats. Was I sure I wanted to jeopardize my career? Did I understand the consequences? I understood them better than they did. I had built the system, protected it, and now held the leverage they believed belonged to them by default. That afternoon, I sent a single email to every major client the company relied on. No accusations, no dramatic language, just patent numbers, timestamps, and a statement confirming that the rights to the technology belonged exclusively to an independent developer. Within minutes, the narrative changed. Their clients began asking uncomfortable questions. Contracts paused. Lawyers mobilized. The facade of corporate invincibility cracked in an instant. They had built their future on a foundation they didn't own. I didn't destroy their reputation. I simply revealed who actually held the keys. It wasn't revenge. Revenge is emotional. This was survival, and survival always negotiates from strength. News travels quickly in corporate circles, especially when panic is involved. While my former company scrambled to explain why their flagship technology was legally unusable, another message appeared in my inbox. It came from a rival firm known for bold decisions and smart acquisitions. They didn't ask for resumes or references. They asked for a conversation. The tone was different, respectful, curious, and entirely devoid of entitlement. They understood the value of innovation, not just the illusion of it. We met in a minimalist conference room overlooking a busy financial district. Their CEO didn't waste time pretending he understood my system. Instead, he focused on what mattered: ownership, potential, and vision. He offered something my old employer never imagined I deserved: full creative control, equity, and a team whose sole purpose would be to scale my software into a global platform. It wasn't a job. It was a partnership. They didn't want to cage the idea. They wanted to amplify it. Within months, everything transformed. The system that once sat hidden behind company firewalls now drove international operations for firms that had never heard of my former employer. Compliance reports that used to take days were generated in minutes. Audits that triggered dread became predictable and transparent. Clients spoke about efficiency the way people talk about miracles: half disbelief, half relief. The industry adopted my system not out of loyalty, but necessity. Competitors realized if they didn't switch, they would be left behind. Adoption spread like a quiet revolution. People who once ignored my emails now forwarded them internally with urgency. Invitations flooded my calendar. Conferences requested keynote sessions. Analysts dissected my journey as if it were an entrepreneurial case study. Influence arrived not through job titles, corporate applause, or forced respect, but through undeniable utility. Ownership reshaped the power dynamic. I wasn't asking for a seat at someone else's table. I was building the table everyone wanted to sit at. Meanwhile, my former company faded from relevance. Their attempts to mimic my work failed without the architecture that only I controlled. The slide deck they once guarded like treasure became a relic of ambition without execution. My career didn't collapse when they pushed me out of that boardroom. It recalibrated, redefined, and reemerged stronger than they could ever imagine. I didn't rise because they believed in me. I rose because I finally stopped believing I needed them.